Hello all, welcome back to our course on digital accessibility, and today we will discuss about some economic and legal aspects of accessibility and related issues. So, while digital accessibility is kind of an insignificant untapped economic market and it has a competitive advantage, and we need to yet kind of understand the economic advantage that one can get if you want to enter into this niche, because it's majorly not explored, particularly in countries where the compliance and mandates are still coming around. It is still there's a lot of scope, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. So, especially if you are thinking of possible problem areas for you to start a new company, or if you are of course looking at a career move, this kind of a topic where you can build your startup or where you can kind of add that accessibility advantage to your resume is definitely going to help you in the career and give you a competitive advantage in terms of the economic aspects of it. And for companies as well, it definitely brings in that value, because as mentioned earlier, it is largely untapped and there are a lot of open-ended problems which we have discussed in the previous sessions, which remain unanswered, and there is the technology available today definitely can fulfill those gaps, but the expertise to even understand, empathize with those problems, and to make the products compatible with those problems, address those issues in your products, you need to understand, have that empathy for these gaps. And I think something, of course, you are attending this course to get the same ideas and get the same information. So, that is great. In essence, building an inclusive digital ecosystem in India is no longer just a social responsibility, and it is now a legal mandate in a lot of areas. Like SEBI has recently mandated, we will talk about it in the upcoming slides, that all banks and related platforms to banking have to be WCAG compliant. And there was a recent mandate regarding it, and we will have a discussion about it. And it's definitely a sound business decision, not just from a compliance perspective, but also from the fact that it definitely will enhance and enlarge your user base and hence increase profitability margins. Just employing inclusive design principles in your product itself enhances usability, enhances user experience, even for people who are not people with permanent barriers. It definitely increases quality of experience in general, and hence the trust, the adaptability of those products will definitely see an uptick, thus reflecting in your profit margins and your economic aspects of the company. So, it is no longer like a utopia saying that yes, we want to do something good for the society, that is why let us do some accessibility work in our company. It is not the case anymore. So, let us look at it from a profitability aspect as well, and not just a utopian let us do something good for the society aspect. Additionally, the legal framework is now becoming robust and evolving, moving from voluntarily guidelines to mandatory standards, backed by the recent Supreme Court judgment. So, then this was back in April 2025, where there was there was a case where it was mandated, and it was the judgment was given by Supreme Court that accessibility to digital infrastructure is no longer mere policy or choice. It has to be there, it is part of a right. Right. So, basically it is a human right and it has to be catered to. So, engineers, designers and companies have to now kind of look at it in order to imbibe it in their product design. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the economic aspects and what are the various things which are related to the economic aspects. So as we mentioned earlier that this is a large market, and it is not a very much tapped market, still considered niche in terms of the features which the companies are building around their digital products, in terms of even looking at those gaps particularly. So but it is not a small market. So just to give you some numbers, with over 26.8 million people just in India who have disabilities, and this is the 2011 census. I'm sure the numbers are much higher, and we will get to see the more recent numbers in the upcoming census. And a global market of 1.3 billion people, accessible platforms can reach a massive, often overlooked customer base. So it definitely is profitable in terms of numbers and in terms of being untapped. In terms of revenue generation, businesses lose substantial revenue when potential customers abandon inaccessible websites or apps. So basically, if it is not accessible, or even if they were using it, but I think we have discussed about temporary or situational disabilities, or with age, for example, they acquire certain disabilities or limitations, and they eventually, even the loyal customers who have been very loyal to your product or apps, eventually if they find that they are not able to interact with the technology in the similar manner, they are not getting the same experience when they have some temporary disability, or they have some acquired barriers because of age or any other situational aspect. So they tend to abandon the product because of inaccessible features. And there was a study which found out that 71% of customers with disability will leave an inaccessible website, and because it's not accessible, they are not able to garner any information from it. Thus, creating accessible platforms will help retain these customers and thus increase market share. So basically, we're losing out on people who want to use your product, but there are some, because of all of these accessibility issues, they're not able to use it. So why not make the product accessible to them so that they are able to use, and hence you will see an uptick in your revenue. Then cost savings. So inaccessible design increases operational and support costs. So if the design, the core model, the core product itself doesn't have a lot of accessibility features, people may tend to either they abandon the technology, or if they don't have a good alternative, they might turn to your support system a lot more. They may call your support bases a lot more. The operational costs of those support teams is much higher than actually fixing digital features and digital issues. So basically, if they're not able to get accessible features, they often have to rely on alternative, more resource intensive channels like call centers or physical branches where they can go and ask for help in order to understand the platform, or in order to turn on some accessibility features which are not clearly visible, or all of those aspects are there. Then of course, adding accessibility can enhance innovation and brand image for your company. So designing for accessibility often leads to broader usability improvements benefiting all users, right? So I think we have had discussed in several sessions before this, that for example, captions not just help people who are hard of hearing, but also help people who are interacting with the technology in a noisy environment, thus bringing in the same concept of situational barriers or situational impairments. and thus looking at that, we cannot ever assume that any user for that matter is capable with all his or her abilities at all times, right. So, when we design for such users, we are automatically designing the system, making it more accessible for people who are permanently impaired or who have permanent impairments. And thus this also enhances brand's reputation, it also enhances brand's trust amongst its customer base, it enhances the experience overall for not just people who are permanently disabled, but also people who are who may face situational barriers or temporary disabilities. So, just to give you a little bit more perspective, so it's like 1.3 billion people worldwide according to the World Health Organization. 16% of the global population lives with a disability. It can be physical, it can be sensorial, it can be cognitive, or it can be some motor disability, all of those including. So, 16% is a very big number. So, assuming that most of our users are able bodied, it's not really the case. And then also we have we have discussed that even those remaining 84%, they are not always abled. Then $18 trillion globally spending power. So, all of these 1.3 billion people worldwide, they have a good spending power. It's really an untapped market. So, it's a good economic opportunity as well, not just for companies to tailor their projects and products to persons with disabilities, but also for up and coming startups. This is a very interesting niche area where people can just attempt to start a company and try to solve problems. 70% customers prefer digital banking services, and there's a large shift in personal user choices and preferences over the past decade, and people now want to access, say, banking services or other services online or on digital platforms with a wider reach of internet, with a wider reach of smartphones becoming cheaper by the day. So, the technology is now accessible, but is the digital product riding on those technologies or using internet bandwidths and all of those things? If that is not accessible, then it becomes useless, right. So, basically based on these numbers, more than 70% people want to use, for example, digital banking services, but if the banking app itself is not accessible, then it is a very big issue. They are not able to do it. And also, I think we are now seeing a shift that maintaining physical branches, hiring people on those physical branches, and for people and customers also to go to those physical branches is a lot of resource intensive aspects which can get eliminated if everyone is able to switch to digital banking services. They are more transparent, they are more reliable, they are more efficient in all ways. Right. So, the only aspect which remains unanswered to some extent is the accessibility. 96% web pages still fail basic accessibility. So, there's clearly a mismatch where we are saying a majority customers want to use digital platforms, want to use digital products, but then here we are saying majority of the websites are failing accessibility compliance guidelines, right. Almost 100%, almost all of them are failing accessibility compliance. So, then this is a very interesting, good starting point, especially for innovators, especially for designers, engineers, and entrepreneurs who are interested in looking for, possible aspects where they can start their companies. So I think this is a very good problem to start on. And we are not saying that accessibility it's not equal to utopia, right? So we are not saying that you just do it because it's like good for society and all of those things. So the purpose of inclusive design is often to eliminate the barriers and exclusion, right? So that the products and services could meet as many kinds of needs, diverse needs as possible, rather than actually tailoring it for some special use cases or people with special needs. We are making it as diverse as possible. So these are the principles. This can be done by using the principles that we have had a discussion about in some earlier sessions. You can refer back to them if you wish to, in order to understand how we can make technologies more inclusive, what are the various aspects of doing it, rather than just thinking about tailoring it to persons with special needs. So it may appear that to be like a utopian ideal, an incidental charitable or a welfare act, but for most part it is not the case. And now with the recent mandates, it's actually every person's right to demand accessible content, accessible platforms, accessible services. And as companies, as engineers, as designers, as innovators, it is our now part of the duty to deliver it to them. So as we discussed in previous slide also, for most part the internet is inaccessible for people with disabilities. Almost the entire web is inaccessible, and some of the most common accessibility failures are these, so which is like low contrast, missing alt text, empty links and buttons, missing form input labels, missing document language. So I think these are some very basic and very common issues. I think in one of the sessions we have had a discussion about these as well, when we were talking about the automated accessibility evaluation tools. And the same common errors came there as well, and these can be very easily fixed. That is what we found out. So all it needs is intent for action, and then most of it can get resolved. So most companies think that accessibility and inclusion may take up time, effort, or additional money. To some, it's just an alien concept. So the result is an interconnected web created by a few people for a few people like them, or just like an able set of people. So mostly young, urban, upper class, abled, English speaking, economically well off, so or cisgendered male, right? So I mean that is the most common user base which they are making it for. So now internet companies are finally turning a corner in terms of inclusive design, although very slowly, but some of them are leading the change. Microsoft, Google, and Apple being one of them. Some examples, like transcription and captioning in PowerPoint and automatically suggesting alt text for images. So in every image there is an option or dialog box where you have to fill the alt text. auto assistance in maps like Google Maps. So it is telling you take a right, take a left, or take a slight right, and all of those things, which is almost very helpful if particularly you're unable to see. Then there is iOS assistive touch, where there is like a kind of a magnifying glass on your screen. So all of these, and of course there are many more such features which you might be coming across in your day-to-day engagement with such technologies, which are popular ones. And the reason why they are so popular, now maybe you are able to understand, is that they are able to cater to a wider set of audience with all of these inclusive design aspects, and thus we in our work should also try to do the same. Then there is also some aspects of social inclusion, where now some companies are allowing people to pick MX as a gender neutral honorific, so it's not Mr., Miss, or rather just MX, right? So this is an example from United Airlines. So some more aspects of the economic benefit. So inclusion ends up making companies more money, increase innovation via the diversity of thought and experience, increases productivity. So when you serve for the underserved user first, you create a product that is much better for everyone to use. And there is some are very common examples that we might be seeing today is autocorrect or autofill. So the example is that Adaptix was developed by founder Sanjay Patel over a decade ago to help his brother interact with the keyboard on a smartphone, which is like a BlackBerry kind of where it's like this kind of a keyboard, with one hand after he lost an arm on a road accident. So you might have noticed that it is very difficult to type with just one hand if you don't have the other one on the keyboard. So then he developed this algorithm, this program, where he incorporated in the keyboard itself, where he could type and some of the initial letters, and the algorithm would be able to predict or autocomplete those texts. So it was some early machine learning algorithms which were built, and later Microsoft, Apple, Google, everyone developed these features as part of their default keyboards. And now it's a feature which we cannot even imagine our interfaces without, right? So a lot of such inclusive designs which were initially made for persons who are permanently impaired have made their way into mainstream interaction design, and thus making usability more, their products more usable for everyone, right? Because even there may be situations where a lot of times we only are able to use our one hand and our other hand is occupied somewhere. So maybe one of the common examples that I can think of is probably when I am typing while riding the metro train, and I'm holding like a bar with one hand, and with the other I am able to type because the algorithm is able to autocomplete. So some of the companies are still stuck in the MVP versus the MLP debate. So while MVP means, I'm sure you all might have heard, is minimum viable product. So there's a race basically to get out the MVP before everyone else, and they, in that attempt, kind of keep aside the minimum lovable product, of which a technology or a product which would be adapted by a large number of users or a wide variety of users is kind of kept aside in that race to make a minimum viable product. And this urgency has resulted in a lot of cluttered and confusing apps that exclude some groups of users. So, user satisfaction should be looked as one of the demands or needs itself while designing the product. So, when you're framing your product brief, satisfaction or experience should be one of the topmost aspects where we are looking at. So, disappointed customers who are losing trust in your company or gaining more trust in the competitors is an economic loss, right. So, why there is a need to conceptualize an inclusive solution? So, in terms of, again we are again looking at some of the other economic aspects. So, it is far more costly to retrofit an inclusive design. So, it is important to start in the beginning and at the conceptual stage itself conceptualize an inclusive solution rather than be bound by the deadlines or the MVP definition and give out a non-inclusive product design. So, answering some of the key questions at the conceptualization itself will help coming up with inclusive solutions. So, for example, how similar or different are the people using this to me? This would also help you in getting rid of personal biases. What other ways could people use this? So, what are the different ways the people would adapt if it is not being used in the intended manner? So, will people who buy a new phone be able to use the app without any help? So, is the transition easy from one product to another product if they change the brand of the phone or the interface, like the basic OS changes, still would my product still be useful or not? I think or whether they will be able to set it up again, onboard the system once again without anybody's help or not. Will our product support or harm vulnerable groups? This is one of the most important questions, and if you ask it, then probably you will be able to get some answers in the very initial stages, that is conceptualization itself. This is something which we have discussed earlier and because it is coming up again and again in this discussion of economic aspects, I thought maybe it's a good time to kind of retouch upon it. So, we have had a discussion about something called permanent, temporary and situational biases. We have talked something about something called permanent, temporary and situational impairments or disabilities. So, somebody who may have just one arm may have a permanent impairment, somebody who has an arm injury may have a temporary impairment of the similar kind, and somebody who is holding something, somebody or some instrument or something in their one hand, baby or somebody, then it is a situational impairment. And in all three of these cases, the user is only able to use one hand for any of the interaction that they are going to use. So, again coming back to our example of Adaptex and autocorrect or typing with one hand on your phone. So, does the keyboard allow you to do it with ease or not is something that if you are able to answer, you are helping not just this person, but also all of these persons as well. And if we try to understand, maybe when we think about disability, when we only think about the permanent disabled people, then their numbers are, although their numbers are not as small, but still their numbers are much lower, right, as compared to people who are so called able bodied. But if we also include the temporary or the situational people, there is a much bigger user base which benefits from all the inclusive changes, all the various aspects of accessibility that one may be incorporating to their design in order to address the permanent permanent impairment itself. So for even if we say 1.3 billion people, it is much larger number of people who will benefit from inclusive design or accessibility features in your product. So that kind of justifies the economic costs put towards those accessibility expertise, bringing them in your team or in your company. And thus it's really not like just a charitable work, but it's also has a lot of economic potential which is really untapped and can benefit the company in several ways possible. So inclusive designs can benefit a much larger number of people, and of course that would help you not just in building the profitability numbers, but also trust among the customers. So let us now discuss some of the legal aspects of accessibility. So earlier this year in 2025, in a landmark judgment where Pragya Prasoon and others versus Union of India and Amar Jain versus Union of India and others, the Supreme Court declared that digital access is an intrinsic part of the fundamental right to life and liberty under section 21, under article 21 of the Indian Constitution. And thus this judgment actually makes digital inclusion a constitutional necessity rather than just a policy choice. And recently in this year itself, there has been some more very integral recent events. So of course one is the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016. This has been discussed at length in one of the previous sessions of this course. You can go back to that one to get details about the specific details of the RPWD Act of 2016. So I'll just summarize it right here. So RPWD Act of 2016 is the principal legislation mandating that all government and private sector providers have to ensure that their services are accessible. Under section 42 specifically addresses access to information and communication or ICT technologies, under which most of our digital interfaces kind of come. So, and then they have, I think we have already discussed quite a lot about the WCAG guidelines or the GIGW guidelines, which is the guidelines for Indian government websites, the law requires adherence to national as well as international standards. So, this is WCAG is the international standard and GIGW is the national standard. Then there is also the BIS standard, Indian Standards on Accessibility Requirements for ICT products. This also we have discussed in one of the previous sessions. This is also a legally enforceable standard developed by the BIS, which is Bureau of Indian Standard. So, how that is now getting enforced? So, all of these standards now are in place, and the Supreme Court has said that yes, it is part of the fundamental right to life and liberty, right, that you have to have digital access, right. Digital access is now a part of fundamental right. Just to kind of make you understand. And then all of these benchmarks are also already in place. After this, the enforcement and the penalties come into picture. Whenever we talk about any law or mandate, it tells you that why, what it falls under is part of the constitution. Then there are guidelines or standards up to which this any system should live up to, and what happens if they are not doing it. So, regulatory bodies like the Reserve Bank of India and the Securities Exchange Board of India, which is SEBI, have issued directives mandating accessibility for all regulated entities. That means all banks of our country have to ensure that their digital platforms and their digital products, be it the app or the net banking website, all of this are compliant with the WCAG or GIGW. Otherwise, there can be penalties. Non-compliance organization can face fines up to 5 lakh or other legal consequences. And there is a chief commissioner for persons with disabilities. CCPD has begun enforcing these standards and imposing penalties for the same. So, many countries like other than India, like the US and Canada, have mandated incorporating WCAG in their websites and apps. In the UK, a website has to either meet the minimum criteria for accessibility and inclusion to be even allowed to go live. So, it is not even their call, even a private entity, their call to even publish the website without getting meeting the minimum criteria and getting a accessibility clearance. So, it has been a mandate for government websites. Now, it is also a mandate for banking platforms, which covers both government as well as private sector. Failure to comply can invite lawsuits and fines now in India as well. And now it is 3 times more expensive as well as time consuming to deal with the aftermath of non-compliance. And there have been very serious lawsuits against companies, big companies like Domino's and Target, etc. So, there are then accessibility. This gives way to expertise requirement for making products and websites accessible. So, as we were discussing about possible consultancy and possible accessibility consultancy startup opportunities, similarly there is a company called Stark which makes software accessible, which helps companies to make their software accessible or website or apps, everything accessible. You can check their website out at this link. So, but while we talking about compliance and the legal aspects, WCAG, which is the main benchmark, is not comprehensive itself. So, it only lists some basic accessibility standards, although it is still an evolving document. There are criteria which are being added every now and then. The document keeps getting updated. The techniques, etc., which we saw in the previous session, which are there in the WCAG listing, they keep getting updated with all of these new platforms which are used for making websites and applications. They help in making digital tools accessible, but many a times even if they say that they are compliant they may not be really accessible. Right. So, a live audio only platform has no legal obligation under WCAG to provide audio captioning, WCAG 2.0 to provide audio captioning for the hearing impaired. Maybe you can have an assignment now to go and check whether the recent WCAG guidelines of 2.2 has this criteria or not. Then there are several government websites like the CoWIN app or even the IRCTC app, which is majorly designed in the English language. So, they are by default seem to exclude the rural population, the people who do not understand English. So, there is definite language barrier. There is also maybe technologically challenged people, but the applications kind of seem to overlook those criteria. So, to summarize, we had a discussion about the economic benefits of inclusive design, the legal aspects and compliance related aspects, and what are the things which are happening in India in the recent times, and how the compliance mandates have evolved recently. And there is also mandates around conducting accessibility audits and via a third party company. So, maybe if required, you can suggest the same at your own organization, that let us hire an accessibility auditor or an accessibility expert organization in order to do a check of your digital products and let you and your team know that what are the various compliance issues that the product has, so that you can be proactive in making your company and making your products inclusive before the mandates around all products hit the floor. So, I think that is a very important key takeaway from today's session. Thank you for sticking around with our course on digital accessibility. We'll see you again in the next session.